Hello, my name is Jacob Kean. I appreciate the chance to present today and thank the Learning Health System Rehabilitation Research Network, or LeaRRn, for the opportunity to present. I split time now between the Department of Population Health Sciences at the University of Utah and the VA Informatics and Computing Infrastructure, both of which are based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Through a contract, I also support the Defense Health Agency Research and Engineering Directorate. Through these roles, I'm fortunate to work with so many great people, some of whom are listed on the slide here. I'd like to thank them for their collaboration and their contributions to this presentation. My talk today is titled Electronic Health Record Repositories, Benefits and Challenges of Data Standardization in Rehabilitation. As such, I want to talk briefly about the history and promise of electronic health records. I want to talk also about the emergence of EHR repositories, efforts to standardize the structure of electronic health record data, and challenges to data standardization and rehabilitation. I will finish the talk today with some practical steps on repository use and future directions for research and development. Okay, first, a bit here on learning health systems and a little history on electronic health records. This background will set the stage for a discussion of EHR repositories. Depicted here on the slide is the learning cycle in Friedman's conceptualization of the learning health system. This conceptualization has been at the heart of many LeaRRn initiatives and probably presented many times in these webinars. At the highest level of abstraction, we have learning cycles which convert data to knowledge, or the D2K cycle. Another segment of the cycle is applying that knowledge to influence performance, or the K2P cycle. And a third is documenting changes in performance to generate new data that seeds the next iteration of the cycle, or the P2D segment of the cycle. Though LHS data are broader than those collected in the electronic health record, the EHR is absolutely essential to learning health networks. Okay, a bit of history here about the electronic health record that helps set the stage for repositories and learning health systems. Early EHRs were incompatible, they were incomplete, and they were hybrid systems, that is, electronic paper hybrids. They were developed primarily at academic health systems, and their history goes back into the 1970s. There was an impetus for promoting widespread adoption of electronic health records, and that was a 1992 Institute of Medicine report. The report listed practical drivers to widespread adoption, including rapidly increasing healthcare costs, the push for electronic quality monitoring, and rapidly advancing technology that increased the feasibility of fully electronic data capture. The IOM report was also aspirational, citing the opportunity for robust clinical decision support, the computer-based personal electronic health record, and the report outlined a future that included data sharing within and across systems. By 2009, electronic health records were delivering on many potential benefits, especially on lowering some of the administrative costs for healthcare. At this point, the HITECH Act was signed into law. It proposed the meaningful use of interoperable electronic health records throughout the care delivery system in the United States as a critical goal for the nation. CMS established the criteria to qualify for incentive payments as systems adopted, implemented, upgraded, or demonstrated meaningful use of certified electronic health record technology. As the use of EHRs grew, so did the interest in secondary use cases like research and quality improvement. Utilizing EHRs might help counteract the high cost and slow pace of research, lengthy patient recruitment efforts, and limited information about subpopulations. As EHRs were adopted, repositories and warehouses for EHR data became important infrastructures to support operations and research analyses, as well as reporting. The next section discusses repositories and federal investments made to support primary and secondary use cases for EHR data. With the observed benefits of EHRs and financial incentives to adopt EHRs, new information technology infrastructures were created and data accumulated rapidly. This was furthered along by the scale of the adoption and by the longitudinal nature of health record. There's a lot of data and it was accumulating at a very rapid pace. On one hand, hooray, we can do so much with data and that's fantastic. And these are both operational and use cases. On the other hand, the infrastructures that were created took the form of thousands of tables in a data warehouse. For example, take the EPIC system. The EPIC electronic health record system backend is a hierarchical database called Chronicles. Chronicles is a database that feeds another database, Clarity, a relational reporting database. Clarity in turn feeds Caboodle, a relational database that represents a subset of Clarity data and allows more simplified reporting. And Cosmos is a hosted data warehouse built on Caboodle that includes analytic tools and a HIPAA-limited data set combining the EPIC EHR data of 122 million patients. I say this to illustrate we're talking about an enormous amount of data, particularly across systems. And we're talking about a very complex data infrastructure that includes hundreds or thousands of tables. It isn't just EPIC that's complex. Cerner has Millennium, Power Insight, and HealthFax products that are similarly complex. The advantage of warehouses is that they provide the structure and organization for these many thousands of tables to make them more useful for research and operations use cases. They also support legacy data consolidation. For instance, what happens when the data you need spans the old EHR and the new EHR, given that health systems change vendors from time to time? You don't want 1,000 lines of code to pull data. And so data warehouses reorganize the data for effective use. One federal investment in the research reuse of EHR data is the VA Informatics and Computing Infrastructure, or VINCI. I serve as a research scientist on the VINCI team. VINCI is an effort supported by the VA Office of Research and Development. VINCI helps support the use of data from the VA Corporate Data Warehouse and other sources. Much of the data are generated by the healthcare operations of the Veterans Health Administration. VHA is the largest integrated health system in the United States. It provides care at nearly 1,300 facilities, including 171 VA medical centers. These facilities provide care to over 9 million veterans enrolled in the VA healthcare program. So again, lots and lots and lots of data. The primary goal of VINCI is to promote access to data and the applications needed to transform and analyze that data in a central secure environment inside the VA intranet. VINCI supports VA through 4 areas of focus: workspace, data, study and collaboration tools, and services. VINCI holds computing resources, works to provision data for studies, and supports cohort development and all sorts of informatics work around research. VINCI started as an afterthought in 2008. It was initially part of the Consortium for Healthcare Informatics Research, or CHEER, and was called the Centralized Computing and Data Structure. It supported the computing needs for CHEER natural language processing, which were considerable, and over time grew. In 2012, VINCI was funded as a VA major initiative. It became an HSR&D resource center and shifted from conducting research as a primary focus to supporting research as a primary focus and the many users in VA. This was a time of development that included building of operational services such as data provisioning, cleaning and curating data, clinical trial recruitment, natural language processing, and cohort building. This grew over time, and 10 years later in 2022, VINCI became an ORD initiative and supports operations, research and development initiatives across the VA, not just in HSR&D. The organic growth of VINCI illustrates the appetite and need for services around the electronic health record. Our VINCI team helps keep veteran data secure while supporting operations and research. The services also support high quality use of the data by consumers with a broad range of skills. This slide illustrates 50% growth in VINCI research requests over the last 5 years in fiscal years 2018 to 2022. As you can see, the red line, which represents 2022, reflects a significant uptake in the COVID-related studies that began in the summer of 2022. Over this period of time, from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 22, as you can see, there were roughly 2,000 approved research requests at the beginning of this time period, and yearly more than 3,000, or I don't know, say 3,300 per year 5 years later. Rapid growth over time, and again, shows the appetite for these data and support around these data. I've included this slide as well to illustrate the broad set of data domains that are provisioned by VINCI. Apologize for the size of the text here, but as you can see at the top, CDW is listed, and it is the CDW EHR data that is most often provisioned, but certainly many other data domains provisioned by VINCI. Another large health system is the US military health system, which serves approximately 9.5 million beneficiaries. The graphic on the left depicts hospitals and ambulatory clinics that compose the MHS. Like VINCI supports operations and research use of VA data, Military Health Systems Information Platform, or the MIP, supports the use of MHS clinical data. It's a system containing multiple dashboards and databases and delivers enterprise clinical data capabilities. For instance, data warehousing, application support, business intelligence, analytics, legacy data consolidation, and a number of surveillance activities. These types of projects enabled by the MIP include clinical dashboards, reports, ad hoc data requests, medical history tracking of individual service members, and identification of service members at elevated risk of injury or mental health. Another useful repository is DaVINCI. DaVINCI is a data warehouse and analytic platform that combines DoD and MHS, or DoD, MHS, and VA healthcare data. It's a longitudinal data set, so think of it as a concatenated database that includes both the records, the health records from the Department of Defense and those from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It's longitudinal, and it provides a consolidated view of veteran healthcare from accession to internment. It's a cornerstone for informatics data sharing and an opportunity for innovative collaborations in support of health analysis, research, operations, and other relevant needs. In the DaVINCI effort, VA has sent over 53 billion rows of data to DoD for 41 million veterans. And DoD has transferred almost 19 billion rows of data to VA for 16 million service members, separated service members. The data transfer is ongoing and has updates each quarter. As a government-developed middleware application, DaVINCI provides a desired level of interface between the data warehouses supporting the electronic health record applications for DHA and VHA. Another federal investment in research repositories is PCORnet. PCORnet has been developed with the funding from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCORI. The centerpiece of the PCORnet effort is a distributed research network that combines patient-generated and clinical data. The distributed research networks are represented here by the dots on the map and are color-coded to correspond with the network name. The distributed nature makes PCORnet different than VINCI, the DHA MIP, or DaVINCI. Instead of data being held centrally, data are held at each participating site. Database queries are developed by a study and then sent to the coordinating center. The coordinating center distributes queries to the sites who participate in the research. The sites run the queries and report the results back to the coordinating center. And the coordinating center aggregates the results and reports them back to the lead site. This distributed model maintains data safety and security under the protection of institutional firewalls, which mitigates the risk of releasing protected health information. This allows many sites to come together and support research like the large centralized VA or MHS health systems, except that they're distributed around the country. I mentioned on the previous slide the clinical research network and coordinating center components of PCORnet. PCORnet also includes patient partners, and input from these patient partners makes the research better. Over time, it's been demonstrated that the input has effectively accelerated study enrollment rates, improved protocol designs, and inspired more relevant research aims and strengthened the dissemination of the results. Additionally, PCORnet supports more than retrospective studies. In fact, most of the studies in PCORnet are prospective. The distributed networks support many studies with data from the EHR repositories and pair it with data collected specifically for the study and managed using separate research data capture tools. So PCORnet allows you to query existing data stores and look back on data that have been collected, but it also provides a nice complement to prospective data collections and study-specific data capture. This slide depicts the data captured in the PCORnet National Clinical Research Network. The network has available data from 66 million individuals. The darker the area in the slide, the larger the number of participants by geographic region. Another distributed resource is the ACT, or the Accrual to Clinical Trials Network. ACT is a real-time platform that allows access to nationwide Federation of Clinical and Translational Science award sites. It contains 150 million patient records and 90% of the CTSA consortium. It allows researchers to explore and validate feasibility for clinical studies across the NCATS Clinical and Translational Science Award Consortium from their desktops. The ACT network queries the total number of patients at each participating site that meet inclusion or exclusion criteria, such as demographics, diagnoses, lab results, and most frequently prescribed medications. As depicted here, the ACT network can help researchers confirm feasibility, identify sites and collaborators, and demonstrate recruitment feasibility to funders. The last data resource that we'll talk about is Trinetics. Trinetics is another distributed resource. It works by connecting a computer appliance to the data warehouses at participating institutions. That appliance supports queries from other Trinetics partners. The Trinetics network is large, including thousands of sites and 300 million patients, I believe in 24 countries across the world. Among other things, it can be used to determine if there's a sufficient population that matches a protocol. It can be used to investigate attributes and comorbidities of a cohort. It can be used to analyze inclusion-exclusion criteria and the impact of changes on those criteria. And it can be used to identify study sites based on expected patient population. This slide is a comparison from a PCORnet slide deck. I've included it here because it shows the distributed EHR resources that we've discussed and others, and compares them with one another. The two columns on the right are particular areas of emphasis for PCORnet. They're valuable features, and if important for a given project, might help direct one to PCORnet over some of the other resources here. Other areas for comparison, such as total population, PCORnet would not come out ahead. Even with 66 million individuals, Trinetics, Optum, Odyssey, and Sentinel are all larger. But again, this just shows comparison on a set of features that PCORnet found important. We'll transition here to data models, which can improve the use of data and which underpin many of the centralized and distributed resources we've talked about previously. Though repositories and warehouses help organize EHR data, there's variation in their structure. They're not fully interoperable, meaning that variation in their structure creates barriers to combining and integrating the information. For example, it's usually the case that a single warehouse doesn't even include all of the information, all of the data from a single patient. That resides in multiple warehouses, which again are not interoperable. Common data models are standards-based and they're EHR agnostic. They standardize the structure and sometimes the coding of these disparate databases. As mentioned before, they can be maintained locally, which helps mitigate privacy and governance concerns. Alleviating these concerns helps to make data more available. Standardizing data structure also increases the speed at which we can build analytic data sets and complete analyses. Do you remember the slide that showed the uptick in VINCI data requests during the summer of 2020? Data models helped accelerate the scientific throughput during COVID, and VA data were among the first and most influential data sources for policymakers wrestling with public health challenges during the early phase of the pandemic. One common data model, and one that you might find at your academic institution, is the Informatics for Integrating Biology in the Bedside, or I2B2 STAR schema. I2B2 has a relatively long history at many academic institutions, and so that might be a data model that's in use at your institution. It was established in 2004, and it refers to really broadly to an open source clinical data analytics platform. The common data model is a component of that broader effort. The graphic here is a high-level overview of the I2B2 common data model. I2B2 is designed primarily for cohort identification. It's self-service and it allows users to identify patients meeting certain inclusion or exclusion criteria. I2B2 and the suite of tools around the common data model can also perform simple data analyses of de-identified patient data and explore hypotheses for clinical studies and trials. Another data model that you may encounter at your institution is the Sentinel CDM. The Sentinel initiative is led by the Food and Drug Administration. It was mandated by Congress in 2007. Historically, administrative and insurance claims databases were used to investigate safety questions about FDA-regulated products. However, FDA was only able to work one at a time with healthcare systems to evaluate given safety issues. Sentinel uses EHR data from many sources and allows safety assessment of approved medical products, such as drugs, vaccines, and medical devices. In the graphic on the slide, the CDM is represented on the left. On the right, the process for querying the data is represented. Briefly, as you walk through sort of from top left to the bottom and back up again, a study is designed, queries are distributed to the different data partners who are all in the same common data model. The query results are returned to the operations center after being run, and the aggregated results are compiled by the operations center and reported back to the FDA. Sentinel is now the largest multi-site distributed database in the world dedicated to medical product safety. A third distributed EHR resource is PCORnet. The PCORnet CDM was originally based on the mini Sentinel common data model. So its roots are with Sentinel that we just covered. It's been informed over time by other distributed initiatives, such as the HMO Research Network, CDC's Vaccine Safety Data Link, and various AHRQ distributed research network projects, and also the ONC standards initiatives. The PCORnet CDM is positioned within the healthcare's standard terminologies. So it includes ICD, SNOMED, CPT, and LOINC to enable interoperability with and responsiveness to evolving data standards. In many cases, PCORnet also works like Sentinel. Study is designed, queries are distributed to data partners, query results are returned to the partners, or excuse me, to the operations center, and then the aggregated results are reported to FDA. But as I mentioned before, it isn't strictly just retrospective data that's being pulled in PCORnet, but also many prospective data, prospective studies that are being conducted, data collected in the electronic health record alongside study-specific data. The fourth data model, and maybe the most popular, is the Observational Medical Outcomes Partnership, or OMOP. OMOP is a data model that was a public-private partnership, I believe, and is one that's favored by many institutions and many life sciences companies for its flexibility and its ability to capture many concepts. I won't talk a whole lot about it, but OMOP is one of the most common models, and it will likely be one that you may be able to find data in your campus. Although data models have many benefits, there are multiple models. And though they're conceptually similar, the tables, the field names and definitions, and the concepts are all different. Having many data models takes us back to the problem, the lack of interoperability that they were designed to solve. One recent project included partnership from the FDA, the NLM, and NCATS, and they put together a harmonization project to create a way to overcome this hurdle by either harmonizing the data or harmonizing queries. Some progress was made on a small set of use cases, but nonetheless, we still have multiple data models out there. Important for this project, and the link listed in the slides here takes you to a set of mappings that were created that help bridge the different data models. Many of your institutions will have ETL, or extract, transform, and load routines that will transform data from one of these data models to another, like from PCORnet to OMOP, or vice versa. Many of your institutions will also maintain data warehouse resources in multiple data models, depending on the scope and of their national collaborations the system participates in. So it can often be the case that because of participation in a number of networks or a number of initiatives, the campus EDW resources will maintain data in these multiple data models. We've talked so far about the importance of electronic health records to learning health systems. We've also discussed some centralized EHR resources and distributed EHR resources that can help promote research. We've talked also about the standardization of data and data models to help improve the accessibility and use of EHR data. I'd like to spend time now talking about the challenges of using the EHR for rehabilitation research. Some of the challenges of using EHR resources for rehabilitation research have been demonstrated in the recent work of Carol Tucker and Nick Kosilniak. They note that rich clinical information in rehabilitation is often unstructured. In other words, the most important details are in the clinic note. This information is difficult to extract from the EHR. It often depends on natural language processing, which focuses on one concept at a time and must be developed and validated one concept at a time. It's also a privacy concern because it's difficult to de-identify clinic notes. Even when the data are structured, Tucker and Kosilniak note, they're often missing. In a recent study in Physical Therapy Journal, they found that completeness for discrete data elements for physical functioning was only about 10.5%. Completeness for outpatient gross motor function classification system, or GMFCS, was about 20% for outpatient care and 38% for inpatient care. Our ability to support learning health system initiatives in rehabilitation is limited by the amount of unstructured documentation in rehabilitation and the lack of completeness in the structured data elements. We need more structured data elements. We need more completion in that structured data element. Where Tucker and Kosilniak have focused on evaluating and mapping the documentation of measures in the EHR, Tessa Hart and colleagues have focused on the documentation of treatments. They point out that much of our treatment documentation is characterized by a descriptor such as gait training and is measured by recording the number of minutes that a therapist led an activity. Gait training, for example, is an intervention that's going to look different from patient to patient and may mean different things from provider to provider. This patient to patient and clinician to clinician variation at least introduces noise in the study of EHR data and limits our ability to advance learning health systems and rehabilitation because of their heavy dependence on EHR. In many cases, it isn't just noise that it's introduced, but the recording of information in the clinic note makes EHR-based learning health system work not unfeasible. Accordingly, Hart and colleagues have created and over the last few years have advanced the rehabilitation treatment specification system. It is designed to help describe and organize treatments from the theoretical perspective. It specifies the treatment ingredients or what the therapist does or selects. It specifies the mechanism of action or how the treatment is expected to work. And it specifies the target or the aspect of functioning directly targeted for change. There's much more to the RTSS, and I refer those interested to the Manual for Rehabilitation Treatment Specification, which is available through the ACRM website. The RTSS has the potential to improve clinical documentation in rehabilitation and dramatically increase the signal-to-noise ratio in learning health systems research. In this talk, we've covered the importance of the EHR to learning health systems, several centralized and distributed EHR resources that can help support LHS work, and the benefits of data models for EHR data. We've also discussed a few particular challenges for rehabilitation. Our data are often not mapped to standard medical terminologies, making the information difficult to find and difficult to use. What we have mapped suffers from lack of completeness. Further, our treatment documentation is often unstructured and not specified in a way that facilitates studies of comparative effectiveness, for instance, which is a key LHS focus. Given this, what are the practical steps that might accelerate data standardization in rehabilitation and facilitate the use of EHR repositories? I think we should look to LHS efforts in and outside of rehabilitation. Within rehabilitation, the Shrine-funded ShowNet is an example of a learning health system initiative, as is the Cerebral Palsy Research Network. Outside of rehabilitation, we might look to documentation of psychological health interventions in the VA. There have been attempts to standardize the documentation of those interventions, and they may serve as a model for the kinds of complex interventions that are delivered in rehabilitation. I think we should grow expertise as well. Of course, this is a key focus of LeaRRn, and I'm happy to see those efforts continue. Additionally, our VINCI efforts, including regular VA cyber seminars that are free and recorded, provide a wealth of information, as does the VINCI University website. Keep in mind, too, that CTSAs at many of your institutions are a great resource for navigating this EHR repository space. Though growing expertise is great, I think building through partnerships and also building services to support others are important as well. After all, how many skills does a person need to master? Some of the self-service tools discussed today are useful services that can be built out further, as are concierge services to help investigators use data. So person-to-person, expert team, concierge functions that help investigators with focused clinical questions. Finally, many of us are blessed to work in rich clinical research environments and can build teams to advance learning health system work and rehabilitation. I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to the Q&A.